Okay.
Do we have sound for everybody?
Okay. I think we're ready.
Somebody who's on it says that it's only showing the welcoming screen for them.
That's correct.
Okay.
As soon as you start, as soon as we start, then it'll go into the other speaker view.
Sounds great. Just let me know.
All right, Angie, if you're ready, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Okay, tell me when.
Okay.
Good afternoon,
All right,
and welcome
Angie.
to our. You good?
Go ahead. Yep.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this virtual gubernatorial forum. My name is Angie Osgathorpe, and I'm the president of the Davis Chamber of Commerce. And we are thrilled to be partnering with the Association of Utah County Chambers to sponsor today's event, featuring the Republican Party's gubernatorial candidates. Our forum today will be moderated by Dr. Cameron Martin. Dr. Martin has been a member of the Utah Valley Chamber of Commerce Board for several years and has moderated many chamber political events. He is currently the chair of the Utah County's Valley Visioning Committee. We're excited to have him with us today and thank him for his time to moderate this event. Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Thank you, Angie. And thank you to each of you, our participants and candidates, for joining us today in this Zoom forum, which is being streamed live on YouTube and Facebook. A recording of today's forum will be made available to each sponsoring chamber, shared through social media, and posted on the website thechamber.org. That's one word, thechamber.org. The Republican Party's 4 gubernatorial candidates with us today are, in alphabetical order, Spencer Cox, Greg Hughes, John Huntsman Jr., Thomas Wright. Each has earned and held positions and titles of significance and prominence in business and in the public sector. Respectfully, for the duration of this forum, we will simply refer to all candidates by their last name. Candidates, you are speaking directly to business leaders in our state, and we encourage you to frame your answers towards that audience. The rules and format for today's forum are as follows. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, and we will go in alphabetical order, beginning with Mr. Cox. Following the opening statements, we will have 3 rounds of questions, which have been shared with each candidate ahead of time. For each round, the candidate will be asked a question and have 4 minutes each to respond. Candidates, we have communicated with your staff and suggest you have an aide help track your time to notify you when you have 30 seconds left for wrap-up. We are also keeping time, and at the 4-minute deadline, if you're still speaking, I will inform you that your time has concluded and will move directly to the next candidate for his answer. So please watch your time so I don't have to interrupt you. We will proceed in a rolling alphabetical order, so each candidate has an opportunity to be the first respondent. At the conclusion of the 3 rounds of questions, if there is still time remaining in our hour together, we will ask an additional question or 2 taken from the live chat feature on this Zoom forum. As such, we encourage listeners to offer insights and questions through the chat feature. I will let the candidates know how much time they will have to answer any additional question asked. When the question portion has finished, each candidate will be given 2 minutes for closing comments. So, candidates, let's begin. Mr. Cox, you are first up for the 2-minute opening statement. The floor is now yours.
Well, thank you so much, Cam, and thank you, Angie and Rana, for hosting us today. It feels so good to be together. I wish we were physically together, but I'm grateful we at least have this opportunity. As you know, unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to do much campaigning over the past couple months, as much as I would have liked to. And so these forums are so important to help us be able to reach voters, especially those in the business community on this forum, and have an opportunity to share our message. Now, there is no doubt that the coronavirus and COVID-19 has impacted this race, as it has impacted all of our lives across the state of Utah. But we feel very confident that our grassroots campaign is equipped to adapt to this new environment. As you know, we were fortunate enough to win the Republican convention. We also have more than 2,200 unique donors. We've visited more than 200 cities and towns. We've collected more than 28,000 volunteer signatures and have distributed more than 5,000 yard signs. We are working hard to earn your vote, and we're grateful for all of those who have volunteered. Now, for Senator Henderson and I, our #1 objective when elected is economic recovery. That's why Governor Herbert selected me to be his lieutenant governor. It's why even before that, I was asked to serve on the Governor's Economic Recovery Commission during the Great Recession, and it's allowed us to be in a very good position to recover quickly. In fact, the White House has listed us as one of 8 states that they believe will actually lead the economic recovery here in our country. But there is a more important question to ask than that. We are going to recover. It's the history of Utah. The history of Utah is doing hard things and coming out better on the other side. When we look at what it means to get back to normal, the question we have to ask ourselves, how do we get back to an even better normal? And I'm excited to share my vision with you throughout these questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Mr. Hughes, 2 minutes is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a great forum. I would concur also. I think these formats are important in this race. And by way of introduction, my name is Greg Hughes. I'm running for governor. I am a small business owner. I know what it's like to pay overhead, make overhead, and keep payroll going. I've been a public servant. I served for 16 years in our state House of Representatives, and the last 4 years as Speaker of the House. So I've been a public servant. Those are perspectives I think that are important as we get into this race. I'm proud to have Victor Iverson, Commissioner Iverson from Washington County, as my running mate. He was the president of the Utah Association of Counties, which are elected by the elected county leaders across the state. So he's understands our local governments, and he has a perspective that has brought, I think, in our campaign, just rich debate and perspective that you get with a team that you have with myself and Commissioner Iverson. Look, we are in tough times, and tough times don't last, tough people do. And one of the things that we have in this climate is, as it was described, we're in unprecedented times. There's a saying, it's if you want to make everyone happy, don't be a leader, sell ice cream. And I'm not selling ice cream here. We're going to have, these are all my friends. I've worked with every one of the people that are on this Zoom candidate forum platform we're on right now. They're friends of mine. We're going to have some tough conversations today. We're going to talk about some tough things. The one thing I'm going to talk about, and in these unprecedented times, we're going to talk about our constitutional liberties and how this platform of how we as a people, with our constitutional liberties in hand, everything goes from there and springs from there. And I'm seriously worried about where the state has gone. And I think it is absolutely relevant and worth talking about in this campaign, how we address economic recovery, smart public safety and health, but also keeping our liberties in mind.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hughes. Mr. Huntsman, your 2 minutes, please. Let's begin again. Mr. Huntsman we can't hear you, so let's begin again.
There we go.
There we go. We can hear you now.
There we go. You know, this technology takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's a great honor, Cameron, to be with you and Angie and Rona and all of those who are within listening distance of our voices. This is an extraordinary campaign cycle and one that I've never experienced before. I told somebody the other day, it's a little bit like being under house arrest, as I saw people in Russia who were under house arrest, couldn't get out and campaign, and only those who were campaigning were those in public office and who held power. So these venues are, in fact, really, really important. So I commend you for it. I commend you for giving us this opportunity. Michelle Kafusi is my running mate. She's an extraordinary human being, extraordinary leader, mayor of Provo. She's on the front lines in terms of dealing with COVID-19 and ensuring that there is a strong economic recovery. And I'm so very, very proud of her. I've had the great honor of being your governor before. It was the honor of my life. It was the honor of my family's life. I've had the opportunity to serve my country overseas as well. I believe that the combination of what I bring to the table make me better prepared than ever before to do what needs to be done. Now, we're experiencing an extraordinary moment in state history. We have never been here before. But I'm also a believer in the idea that adversity brings with it a certain strength and resilience within the American spirit. My grandmother's grave in Fillmore has a little saying etched on it, and it says, "Sweet are the uses of adversity." It's a line from Shakespeare. And I think about that line all the time because here we are. I want to thank small businesses, particularly at this time, because you've carried a burden that I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate. And I want to thank you for that because you've had to hang out that closed for business sign. And our job will be to turn that around, to get the open for business sign out so we can engage once again as a state. We're entering a fundamentally new period of history. We don't want just a recovery. We should work toward a rebirth, a fundamental redo of what we are as an economy and how we look at key issues of the day. It's a great honor to be with you. Thank you once again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Huntsman. We will now hear opening statements from Mr. Wright. Please, 2 minutes.
Thank you. It's great to connect with you.
Mr. Wright, we missed just the first little seconds. Please start again. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you. It's great to be with you. I want to laud everyone who organized this event and giving us the opportunity to talk about Utah's future. This race is an exciting race because it is about Utah's future. I'm running for governor because I'm the only candidate in this race that comes from the private sector. My 3 opponents have become professional politicians. They're great people. They've done a lot of great things for our state, but I believe that the best is yet to come. And with the economic times that we find ourselves in, I think it would behoove Utah to elect somebody from the private sector, a small business owner who for the last 12 years built his business during the Great Recession, did it during really difficult times. And together with his team, I had to make hard decisions about cutting budgets, about prioritizing our services, about collaborating and creating teams, and about creating results. See, the difference between government and the private sector is the private sector is geared toward efficiency and outcomes. And government tends to be focused on processes. And so they become inefficient over time. And while Utah has had a tremendous run, and I am proud to be a Utahn, I believe this is the best state in the best country the world has ever known. I've lived here, I was raised here, I've raised my family here. Together with my wife, we have 4 beautiful kids. I started a business here. Utah has given me so much. But I believe when you have the same people involved in state government for an extended period of time, there can become some complacency. And I believe by putting new people in, we can identify new opportunities. We can see problems in different ways. Now, during this forum, you're going to hear oftentimes all the solutions that my opponents have, but I would just offer to you that they've had their chance. And I believe that anyone can step up and run for public office. And because I believe that, I decided to run. I don't think you have to earn your way into running for private office or public office. I believe that you can have success in the private sector. You can get up and volunteer yourself to serve, and that you can do that, and then you can get out and go to the private sector. So I'm a business person, and I bring that perspective to this race, and I'm flattered to be in the race, and I sincerely ask for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Wright, very much. And thank you to our candidates for your opening statements. Our first of 3 set questions focuses on the coronavirus pandemic and our state's recovery. As businesses in Utah move towards reopening or scaling up operations again, how would you, as governor, balance protecting the physical health of our citizens with protecting the health and vitality of our economy? We'll start with Mr. Hughes. You have 4 minutes, sir.
So thank you, Cameron, for the question. I love this question because I think there's a false choice that's being proffered out there. Do you have a good public safety strategy, or do you have a healthy economy, and does one risk the other? It's a false choice. I'm going to tell you right now that your public health strategy, okay, has to include a public safety or a get back to work strategy, a open the businesses strategy, because if you don't, bills come due every 30 days. We have you got to make ends meet, and in the absence of a very aggressive, let's use the best public health precautions we can, but let's get back to work. If you don't have that, the government's not going to print enough money to replace economic activity. We don't move forward if we don't have that. So if I were to describe a stool, you have one leg that is your public health strategy. You have the other leg that is your get back to work and open businesses strategy. But here's the critical leg that we don't hear enough about, that I am hot about, and I think we got to start talking a lot more about, and that is our constitutionally protected liberties. I'm seeing them disappear here. I'm going to tell you this: freedom of religion. Never did I think, certainly not when I announced my candidacy in January, or even in the beginning of March, that the state government would be dictating to churches and houses of worship how they would open. First, that they couldn't, and then just last week that they actually can. But then issued by state edict, here are the non-negotiable stipulations in which you will open. This is not a role of government. This is something that fear allows us to accept. But freedom of religion, we cannot, our First Amendment rights and our freedom of religion is not negotiable. It is a framework. Our liberties are a framework in which your economic activity and your public safety happens. Look, Soviet-like surveillance devices, if you go over the state line, having government pick what is an essential business versus what is not an essential business. I don't know about you, but if it supports a household, it feels pretty essential. That is not a role of government. And I'm going to tell you that we have to talk about that in terms of how we make sure that 3-legged stool, the Bill of Rights, our public health strategy, and our get back to work strategy are combined to hold up whatever it is we do here. We've just heard from legislative leaders just yesterday that the economic recovery from the shutdown in March could take anywhere from 2 to 4 years to get back to where we were at the beginning of March. There's a lot of hard work, but I'm going to forewarn, if we ignore our Bill of Rights, if we ignore those constitutional protections, that is how we got to where we are right now, those liberties. And so I don't want government trickling out an economy. I'm not really interested in a color code for how we do it. I am convinced that good information drives good decisions. And I believe that the public safety and public health is the aligned interests of those that own businesses, those that work in businesses that want to remain healthy, and the patrons that would frequent those businesses. We all want to be healthy. And I don't think you have to dictate it to people to understand that, or to implement those smart procedures and implement them from the right places. Again, you can have the state decide whatever color code or however they want to do it. But in the absence of a practical plan, one that people can use, they're going to move on. They're going to go out and they're going to go back to work because they have to. People are going to open those businesses, many of which won't open, by the way. There aren't jobs and businesses waiting for some people when we finally do get back to open, or allowed to open. But I'm going to tell you this. If you don't include the things I've just described, you're not going to have a strategy, because our working people of this state, they're just going to have to make their way as they always do. We can't let the full weight of this pandemic be borne on the backs of the working people of our state, as it has up until now.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Mr. Huntsman, you have your 4 minutes, please.
Thank you. I've carried the great honor and the sometimes burden of being governor of this great state. And you carry with you the wishes and the aspirations of the people who elect you, and some who voted and some who didn't. But what you learn through it all is that people want you to look into the future around the bend and try to anticipate risk to our people and to our market, and to be smart enough to bring folks together to deal with those risks and challenges, and to find ourselves to the head in the game. I'm afraid that we're going to come back after a period of time, and we're going to find that we've had a good part of our economy destroyed. This is an issue that we're going to have to work on for many years to come. We all want health. We all want economic vitality. And it pains me that so many of our debates are at the extreme end of all of this, unfortunately. We're the youngest and healthiest population in the country. The average age of victims, sadly enough, who have passed is about 72. I don't think we've done an adequate job in identifying the most vulnerable people in our population. Those who are beyond a certain age, those who have pre-existing conditions. Might be 20% of our population, but we still have 80% of our population who can get back to work and should have gotten back to work a long time ago. So as of May 7th, we have over 107,000 Utahns who applied for unemployment. These are folks with families. They're folks with payments. There may be people with underlying mental health conditions that perhaps aren't treated. The next jobs report is going to come out shortly, and it's going to be a lot higher. You get the feeling that in this state, you need a job epidemiologist as much as you do a health epidemiologist. Even as Utah goes back to work, what does that mean? It's going to mean that consumer behavior is going to be different. It's not going to be the same. The pie is going to be smaller. We've heard statistics about jobs that are simply not going to be available. The world right now is in need of an example of how people can get back to work, get back on their feet, and get re-engaged with the economy. Many jobs won't be here. We must lead the effort in breathing life into our economy. And I think we can do that by making sure that we plant the flag as the economy that is open for business, that is a confident economy, that we focus on retraining, getting people the skills and the background that they're going to need to re-engage with the economy. We're going to need a whole lot more capital. I'm pained that 8 weeks ago, I called for $300 million from the state rainy day fund. That would be the state as the first responder to help businesses that were truly in need, to encourage them to keep employees on payroll. That's the only goal. Knowing full well that federal dollars are to follow, but federal dollars are never guaranteed. It's never a certainty. The paperwork is always terribly bureaucratic, cumbersome, and it takes longer than you think. That hasn't been done. I'm afraid that the capital that has not been made available in abundance. I mean, what do small businesses need right now? They need cash. They need certainty. They need regulatory certainty as they go forward. That's going to be one of the most important things they have. They're also going to need connections to the rest of the markets that they deal with. I believe that our state, under the right leadership, can be an example, not just to our country, but an example to the world of how people get back on their feet and how they get back to work. Keeping people healthy and safe, obviously, is going to be a part of that as well. But I think we're going to learn some important lessons through all of this. That is how we deal with the most vulnerable part of our population, how we educate them, how we care for them, how we deal with their families who are providing support, while at the same time letting the rest of the 80% of the people with safety distancing measures and all the things that we have learned over the last 8 to 10 weeks, allow them to get back to the marketplace and regroup.
Thank you, Mr. Huntsman. We appreciate your answer. Mr. Wright, you have 4 minutes now too, please.
I never thought when I filed to run for office in January that we'd be in the position that we are. Nobody saw this coming. There was no way to predict what happened. But the calls I'm getting from small business owners all over the state and the calls I'm getting from individual citizens have really been a humbling experience. I want to share a call that I had from a guy that I'm going to refer to as Blaine. Blaine called me and told me that he lost his job, that he can't make his payments, that he's worried about his family. He doesn't know when he'll be able to go back to work because of the shutdown. He's absolutely terrified about being able to stay in his home. And we talked for probably the good part of an hour about how he's going to rebuild his life. We have now 150,000 people unemployed in the state of Utah. That is a lot of people and a lot of pain and a lot of anguish. I'm a small business owner. I had to close 14 offices in the state of Utah during this pandemic. In some counties I was required to, and others I wasn't. But in both cases, I did it because it was the right thing to do and because I felt like I could have my employees work remotely and still provide the limited services that we could provide remotely. So we adjusted. But I believe in the proper role of government. And the proper role of government in this instance is to disseminate information and to keep the electorate and the population informed, and then allow people to make decisions that work for them. As a small business owner, like I said, I made the decision to close my offices in all locations because I could and because I felt like that was the right thing to do. I believe it's now time to get back to work. As was pointed out, we have one of the healthiest populations and people are struggling. We have so many people unemployed, just like Blaine, who are reaching out, and small business owners that are calling me, not to ask me my position on issues, but to ask me as a small business owner, how do they get their business back on its feet? How do they capitalize it? How do they open their doors? How do they redefine their service? What does the immediate future look like? What does the long-term future look like? We need to take immediate action in the state of Utah to make sure that we help these businesses and individuals as much as possible. I'm the only candidate that's put forth an economic recovery plan from COVID. It's on my website, rightutah.com, and it's called Jumpstart. And in there are a variety of suggestions and a variety of plans to not only use the rainy day fund, to not only use our AAA bond rating, and to not only cut expenses in state government that right now are not as important as our citizens and their businesses. When the legislature convened and met and passed the budget in January, things were a lot different than they are now. And I applaud legislative leadership for their actions that they've taken during this pandemic, but we need to make sure that we're looking now at our spending and we're asking ourselves one simple question. Does our spending match our priorities? Right now, our priorities are those people that are unemployed who have lost their jobs, those jobs who are probably not going to come back. They're going to need to be retrained. That's why in my economic plan, I talk about retraining in vocational schools and how those people should be getting immediate opportunities to find new career pathways. And with our vocational schools, our community colleges, and our system of higher education, we are uniquely positioned to help them do that. We've had shortages with teachers, emergency service professionals. We've had shortages of mental health professionals. Now is the time to identify where we need our citizens to work and help them attain those skills so that they can get there. But we've got to keep our tax structure competitive, because during these times, government has a tendency to have an insatiable appetite for our money. They don't want to necessarily do what the citizens and businesses are doing, which is tighten their belt, find places to cut, and live within their means. We've got to do the same thing in state government that we're asking businesses to do and citizens to do. And then we need to reallocate our spending so that we're taking care of people and they know that they can get back on their feet and get back into the workforce. And as governor, I've been the small business owner. I know the small business sector. This is what I've done for the last 12 years, is look at balance sheets, manage budgets, make hard decisions, build teams, and make things work. And that's what I'll do as governor. My experience uniquely difficult economic time.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer very much. Just for our participating audience, the question our candidates are answering is about reopening our economy in balance with the physical health of citizens with the health of the economy. Our last candidate to answer this question, it will be Mr. Cox. The time is yours. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Cameron. And I appreciate the question, because inherent in that question is a rejection of this idea that we have to choose between the health of our citizens and the health of our economy. In fact, it's been very clear the fastest way to get our economy back on track is to lead the nation in our health response. And that's exactly what we've been able to do here in the state of Utah. It's why we were one of only 7 states that didn't have to do a statewide shelter in place. Our entire focus early on, we were one of the only states that recognized that testing and contact tracing was going to allow us to go on the offensive against this virus instead of playing defense like everyone else in the world has been doing. And that's exactly what we did. We ramped up testing. We're ranked fourth in the nation in testing per capita, and first in the nation when it comes to contact tracing per capita. So we have led out on a national level We were also the first state to put out a comprehensive statewide plan to open the economy back up and get things moving again. In fact, many other states have actually just copied our plan. They called and said, hey, we haven't done anything on this. We need some help. Can we use your plan? And that's been so important, because what has happened now is that Harvard has said we're one of only 9 states that has the capacity to actually reopen the economy. As I mentioned, the White House has named us one of 8 states that is going to lead the economic recovery, because of the sacrifice of Utahns that has allowed us to get ahead of this virus. And now we were one of the first 5 states to start reopening the economy, getting people back to work. Now, I have some good news that we're maybe the first state where people actually going back to work are outpacing those filing for unemployment. So we've already started to turn this around, and we're heading back in the right direction. Now, there's some other things. As we look, again, as we're looking at recovery more broadly, we have a couple secret weapons here in the state of Utah that we've been working on for several years. One is the inland port, and the other is the Point of the Mountain project, where we're moving the prison. We have companies all over the world that are looking, even now, even with the struggle that our nation and our world are having with economic tragedy, they're looking to come to Utah and bring those jobs with them. And we're focused laser-like on those opportunities to engage companies that want to come here and expand employment. Now, by everything that we've done, and by we, I mean the entrepreneurs of the state of Utah, those who have worked so hard to build businesses, we have led the nation in private sector job growth over the last 6 years. We also have the most diverse economy in the country. That will allow us, that means we have the foundations to, again, allow us to recover much quicker than any other state that is out there. In fact, just last night, Forbes named Provo and Salt Lake City, which is basically the Wasatch Front, as 2 of the top 10 metropolitan areas in this country that will lead us out of this. But again, as we're talking about leading out, what are we leading to? I have a 7-point plan. If you go to votecox.com, you can read about the Resilient Utah plan. We have learned some lessons during this pandemic, and they are lessons that we must not forget. Lessons about making us more self-sufficient and more resilient. We have to bring manufacturing back to our shores and back to the state of Utah in a way that will allow us to protect us against future pandemics. We can't be relying on China and other countries necessary medical supplies. Second, we need to protect our agricultural community and the supply chains that have been disrupted there. We must focus on making sure that our agriculture community, our farmers and our ranchers, that we're resilient and we're protecting them. Finally, we have to look at the things we've learned around telehealth, telework, and teleeducation. We've learned some great lessons there that will benefit us moving forward, and I'm really excited to share more about my plan at votecox.com.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. And thank you to our candidates. We appreciate all your answers. And thank you for being cautious of your time. Our second question considers the need for state investment along the Wasatch Front to accommodate short and long-term growth. Both Davis County, the chamber is helping us sponsor this event, and Utah County, the chambers of Utah County are sponsoring this event. Both of these counties are centers of rapid growth. As governor, how will you balance the need for infrastructure investment in counties with rapid growth compared to counties growing at a slower rate? What is the process you would use to prioritize where infrastructure funding ought to be invested? We'll start with Mr. Huntsman. Mr. Huntsman, you have 4 minutes, sir.
Thank you for that. So what is our vision? This really is the question around this campaign. A lot of words, a lot of statistics, but the gains of the last 10 to 15 years, unfortunately, have been washed away by COVID-19. That's where we sit. So as we go forward, when I say we don't want just a recovery, we want a rebirth. We want to know what we have learned from what we have been through and how we can inform ourselves as we go forward to make us the best economy in the country. So we talk about infrastructure, and it's important to note that when we define infrastructure traditionally, it's about roads, it's about broadband, it's about public transportation, it's about water. and it's about power. And all of that is really important. And aligning our economic development strategy with where people live is always going to be important. I think we've fallen short there. We have 100,000 people who leave the Davis-Weber County area in pursuit of their jobs elsewhere. Why can't we move more economic development where people reside? It would have an impact on housing costs and quality of life and a lot of other things. But what we'll need going forward is a vision that is compatible with where I think the state can be. Now, we all come to this with different backgrounds, and people talk up private sector experience and government experience. And listen, we've all had all the above. We've all been in business. We've all had government experience, or at least exposure to it. What is going to be important going forward is the vision and how we pick up the pace and how we position this state. I've had the privilege of doing that as governor with the 10-point plan that we put forward, very similar to what I will be doing if I'm lucky enough to get elected. So what will the infrastructure of our future look like? So we're no longer going to be the crossroads of the West. I think those days are gone. We need to aspire to be the crossroads of the world, which should inform everything we do around economic development, healthcare, education, quality of life. We should be the crossroads of the world. And as we aspire to be the crossroads of the world, what is it that we're going to need beyond just the traditional infrastructure? Well, we look at the inland port, which I think is going to be a very, very important part of the down payment that we make in this state. It's been talked about since the 1970s. It needs to become a reality. It'll be home to some of our new generation, fourth industrial revolution, AI types of industries, clean manufacturing, transportation, accessing the coast and export and import opportunities, which will be critical for agriculture. But beyond that, let's imagine defense technology. Utah should lead the country in terms of defense sector, cyber, manufacturing, the weapons of warfare for the next generation. What kind of infrastructure are we going to need from that? For that, university training, tech transfer infrastructure, dedicated land for research and development. All of that is going to have to be thought through in terms of what is new infrastructure. Financial technology. I think fintech should be an area of growth. We're totally underperforming in the state as it relates to creating a cluster of excellence. So why is it that Charlotte, North Carolina has become a center for banking and financial activity while we haven't? We have Goldman Sachs. They've been wildly successful. Why haven't we built around that? We're going to need infrastructure called human capital that will be absolutely critical in order for financial technology to soar. Biotechnology, another industry cluster where we ought to be leading the country. We need access to patents. We need laboratory space. We need collaborative relationships with our universities and higher ed partnerships. So how do you prioritize all of this? Well, it's pretty simple. I've sat on the boards of directors, helped to lead companies like Ford Motor Company, Caterpillar, Chevron, among others. I would prioritize all of this investment in infrastructure in what the return on investment is going to be, plain and simple, just like the private sector.
Thank you, Mr. Huntsman. We appreciate your answer. Mr. Wright, your 4 minutes to please respond to the question about balancing infrastructural needs with rapidly growing counties versus slower growing counties. You have 4 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great question because we do have a lot of diverse counties across the state, and they're not all the same. And so we need to make sure that we're creating strategic plans, county by county, and that the county leadership understands that state government will support them at an unprecedented level to help them get what they need to succeed and to have a great plan. But the state also needs a plan because we are an urban state. We're the 4th most urban state in the country. I couldn't believe that statistic when I read it, but it's true. With all the geography we have, we're concentrating more and more in 4 counties along the Wasatch Front, which means we need to have a great strategic plan long term. If we don't, we're going to continue to outgrow our infrastructure. And when we outgrow our infrastructure, we have a diminishing of our quality of life. So let me offer a few suggestions of things that I think are important. Number one, we've seen cities, American cities, that we do not want to aspire to become like. Urban sprawl is the enemy of the American city. And we've seen urban sprawl in our state, and it's contributing to our affordable housing crisis. We continue to build on the perimeter of our metropolitan areas, and that's causing encroachment on our agricultural areas, which we need to preserve and protect. And it also drives up the the need to build more roads, to build more schools, to hire more teachers, which just further adds to our teacher shortage. So it compounds all of our problems. We need to sit down along the Wasatch Front with leaders and come up with a strategic long-term plan for growth along the Wasatch Front in the counties that you specifically mentioned of Utah County and Davis County. If we do that, we can grow together and we can identify the challenges that we have, like the affordable housing crisis. The affordable housing crisis is one of our biggest emergencies in the state of Utah. You cannot have families not be able to access affordable housing or housing at all. Having too many families in one household or having a family living in grandma's basement is not the American dream. It's not the quality of life that people want, and it's not good for our children. Our human capital is the most important thing that we have. We need to make sure that we're financing properly public education and that we're driving outcomes by deregulating the classroom, by getting in and making teachers have an enjoyable profession and paying them a living wage. My opponents have been in government for 16 years and have talked about all of these things, and some of them have happened, and I commend them for that, but a lot of them haven't. And that's why we need new leadership. We need a fresh perspective. We need somebody that comes in and sees it in a different way and brings a team of people that can come in and solve some of the challenges that we face. Northern Utah is a great place. I chose my running mate from Northern Utah, the only one in this race that comes from the northern part of the state. There are tremendous opportunities in the northern part of our state that have not been realized. Northern Utah has largely been ignored, and we need to make sure that Northern Utah is part of the equation when we talk about economic development, because there's great places to relocate businesses, there's unbelievable human talent, and we've proven with Procter & Gamble and Northrop Grumman that the civilian workforce that surrounds Hill Air Force Base is a key economic driver in our state. So we need to continue to enhance that and grow that part of our state, and looking at all opportunities to make sure that there's equal opportunity across the Wasatch Front. Utah County, on the other hand, has had explosive growth. Isn't it amazing and exciting to watch Utah County? But with that explosive growth comes a lot of challenges. And we're seeing those challenges with gridlock in our transportation infrastructure. We need to sit down with state leaders, and as governor, I'll do this, sit down with county commissioners and mayors, and let's create a strategic plan for growth along the Wasatch Front so that it's congruent, it makes sense, and we can provide the amazing quality of life that we have in the state, which is why so many people want to come and live here. So I will balance the growth of the fast-growing counties like Utah and Davis with the ones that aren't by having a long-term strategic plan and executing it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. Mr. Cox, the next 4 minutes are yours, sir.
Thank you, Cameron. And this is such a critical question, and I really do appreciate the way it was asked, because we usually, when we talk about infrastructure, we're only focusing on the Wasatch Front, and for very good reason. And I'll separate those two just a little bit because there are different challenges in each one. First and foremost, I want to thank all of the people who have worked so hard on these issues over the past few years. When I talk about infrastructure, I often share a formula that has always proven true, and that is where infrastructure precedes growth and density, the quality of life is high and remains high. However, when growth and density precede infrastructure, the quality of life goes down. Now, we have been very fortunate to have invested in many critical infrastructure projects throughout the Wasatch Front over the past few years. Of course, we see that with mass transit and other opportunities. There are some places where we haven't seen that. Our east-west corridors are a problem. And when we have density in some of those areas, without the transportation corridors, again, it leads to a diminishing quality of life. And those are areas that we need to be focused on. Now, it's important to note that governors do not and should not be solving all of these problems. Many of these decisions are made at the local level. The local level, as a former mayor and city councilman, they understand better what type of density should be existing within their boundaries, and they play a critical role. And we must always have them at the table when we're making these decisions. Now, I appreciate my colleagues and many of their ideas, most of which we've been doing over the past 5 years, and I'm really excited. If you go to Wasatch Choice 2050, be. There's a comprehensive plan that we've been working on for a long time with all of the local leaders along the Wasatch Front about what those next 30 years look like, what the growth can be, and where it should be, where it should be situated, and a way to keep that quality of life high. Now, I want to focus off the Wasatch Front a little bit, because far too often we don't pay attention to the infrastructure needs there, which leads to this cycle of growth on the Wasatch Front, needing more infrastructure on the Wasatch Front, where for even less money, we can be building out infrastructure into rural areas and shoulder communities that will allow people to live and recreate and work from those places, and not have to continue with the extreme growth that we're seeing on the Wasatch Front. A couple things that really matter here. My business background is in rural telecommunications, and bringing fiber optic communications to rural areas as well as the Wasatch Front. But what we know about the ability, and by the way, what many people are learning right now, is that you actually can work remotely and do so very positively. I don't have time to go into all of it, but a year ago, the governor let me run a quick experiment where we had 130 state employees working from home 3 to 5 days a week. It was amazing. Their mental health went up. They took pollution out of the air. There were less cars on the road, and their productivity went up 22%. Now, that's a game changer for government. It's also a game changer for the private sector, understanding now that we don't have to build as many expensive buildings, saving taxpayer money. We can increase productivity, which means that we don't have to hire as many state employees. But most importantly now, people can live in different areas. And if we invest in that infrastructure in rural Utah and in our shoulder communities, they'll have an opportunity to take those jobs with them. My dad always said that the best product we produced on our farm are our kids. And unfortunately, it was our biggest export as well. And we need to be able to get those kids back home where they want to grow up, where they want to raise their family in rural Utah. And the same thing in urban Utah, making sure that there are jobs available and places for people to live with the right infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Mr. Hughes, your answer to the question about infrastructure investments to counties growing faster than other counties. Please, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Cameron. Let me just start off by saying it's going to take leadership. And I have to go back to a comment that I heard from Lieutenant Governor Cox, and I have to bring up in the context of leadership. You can talk about the state's tracing, its ability to use technology to trace where people have this COVID-19. You can talk about testing and being one of the highest states to test. But when legitimate questions come up or concerns about how the procurement process happened, the Lieutenant Governor, Spencer, you're quick to be at the press conference to start it all, but you got public employees yesterday having to face cameras and journalists to explain the process going forward. Leadership means that you're standing there. You've prefaced many times that you spent the last 2 months of all your waking hours working on this. This is your time to answer those questions. Not you owe those public employees an apology that they have to sit there and answer those questions that you should be taking the arrows for, because it's those types of questions or issues when they get hard that you need a governor that's going to lean in and answer those questions. So let's frame the state of Utah and its population growth. If it's the case that 80% of our state is in 130-mile Wasatch Front, and we're told that by 2050, we're going to double in size, does anyone really believe that 80% of over 6 million people can fit in this 130-mile valley? One of the issues about infrastructure, water, roads, rail, the reason, fiber optics, the reason why it is such a crush along the Wasatch Front is it's a valley. You can't keep sprawling. So we're running out of space. But at the same time, the question says counties that are growing less quickly, or they're not growing as much, here's the truth. 22 counties out of 29 at least have never seen a day of growth. They're shrinking. We're seeing a lot of communities and a lot of young people that grow up around the state of Utah, migrate their way to the Wasatch Front to try and find a job because there aren't economic opportunities where they live. That makes it, we have a high birth rate. So we have a great economy, or had one. And so we see this state growing. I'm going to tell you that is not a sustainable way forward. We have to bring infrastructure investment for the Wasatch Front so that there isn't scarcity of housing where there's more demand than there is supply. That's when the cost goes up and the cost of living goes up. We can't keep pace with all that development, all that growth happening just in 130 miles or 80% of the state for congestion failure, for the way that transportation options are presented. We can't grow that fast. When your commute is longer every single day, that is a quality of life issue that keeps going down. So cost of living is going up, quality of life is going down. And then you have our emerging workforce has been well put. We need this emerging workforce. This is what is so great about our state, is that as we grow economically, we have that infrastructure. So here's the play. You got to make sure there's a relief valve for this Wasatch Front, that there's other places in this state where there can be growth, housing opportunities, cost of living is affordable, quality of life is high. And these are areas that have been starving for it for a long, long time. How do we do it? We bring that infrastructure in, and you have the inland port system. We've talked about this since the 70s. We've done this, worked very hard in the legislature to create our Utah Inland Port Board Authority. Every road, I-15 goes through 3 countries, Canada, the Western United States, and Mexico. I-80 goes across the country, so does I-70. We have every rail line in the West Coast coming into this state somewhere thanks to the Intercontinental Railroad. Those are transportation advantages that no other state has. If inland ports work, and they do, and if they are an ecosystem for economic growth, which they are, and manufacturing is something that this country needs to be more independent and be able to export more and not depend on less, that is a screaming opportunity for our whole state, a system of inland ports. So that's how you do it.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. And to our candidates, thank you for your answers. I'm going to throw you a curveball, because dealing and governing in the public sector is dealing with curveballs. In order to help shape our time, I'm going to ask you to limit your third and final question to 3 minutes, and then we have time for closing statements. So 3 minutes, please. Our third and final question considers what you see as challenges and opportunities in the future of our great state and our business community. The question is, as you take office in 2021, what do you see as the biggest challenges Utah will face that will affect our businesses and our broader economy? And how will you turn those into opportunities for our state during your first term as governor? Mr. Wright, you have 3 minutes, please.
It's a great question. I'm going to share a bunch of concerns in 3 minutes. I love the curveball. It's great, great challenge. The biggest challenge we face right now is complacency. We know what happens when we think success is our birthright, or that we start to take it for granted. Utah has had tremendous success. We built an amazing economy here. Business people have. We have a great quality of life. But if we think it will always be that way without paying the price, we know what happens. That's when you start to lose it. We've seen in the last little bit some complacency in state government with no bid contracts and some things that should raise our eyebrows just a little bit. This is the biggest challenge that we face. We need to elect our best minds from the state of Utah, new people that can come in from the private sector, give government a fresh look. If we just keep handing the baton of power back and forth to the same 3, 4, 5 people, we're going to fall into this state where we think it's just our right to be successful. Success is earned through hard work. It's not given, it's not handed down, and it's not granted. We know that when we commit to a job, we have to work hard. We have to have humility. We have to build teams. We have to be transparent. And we have to finish the job when we start it. And I know those principles well because I was taught them by my parents. I was taught by my grandparents. That's how I built my business. Our greatest challenge in the state of Utah right now is complacency. With a $20 billion budget and 20,000 state employees, we need somebody to come in with a fresh perspective and look at state government budget line by line, ask the tough questions, have difficult conversations, and ask ourselves, how do we get to the next level in the state of Utah? We can talk about the issues because one of our greatest challenges is public education and higher education. We know our air quality is a challenge. We know our tax structure needs to be competitive to get businesses here. But if our state government isn't hungry and ready, and it doesn't do the things it did in the past to get the success that we have now, we're gonna start to slide. And sliding happens slowly. You don't know you're sliding until you're in a full-fledged slide and it's too late to change it. I believe our greatest challenge in the state of Utah is getting that hunger back and remembering that that hustle and humility that got us where we are right now is what we need to get us where we need to be in the future. And you have to elect new people, people that haven't been in government for their entire career. I want to get in, I want to serve, and then I want to get out and I want to go back to the private sector. So I believe our greatest challenge is complacency. Look, we've heard a lot of great ideas. I believe my opponents have had their chance to solve a lot of these problems. The lieutenant governor has owned a rural telecom company, and rural Utah is still not connected to the internet. And he's had his 6 years as lieutenant governor to make that happen. Let's bring in new people with new ideas, and let's make it happen in the state of Utah. Let's never become complacent. Let's never have any pride in our result. If we do that, we will continue to be the greatest state in the country.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Mr. Cox, our challenges and opportunities. You have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Cameron. We've talked a lot about infrastructure in this forum today. One of the most important pieces of infrastructure is education. Education is infrastructure. And when we look at the challenges moving forward from an economic standpoint, from a business standpoint, it really is workforce related. Look, we've made a huge mistake as a society, as a country, as a state over the past 40 years. This idea that every kid needs a bachelor's degree. Now, again, higher education is very important. I'm not saying otherwise. But the mistake that we've made is this idea that every kid needs a bachelor's degree. It's bad for our kids and it's bad for our economy. And I absolutely believe that this is the challenge of our generation, the challenge moving forward, making sure that we have the workforce, that we have the educated workforce for the jobs of the future and the jobs of today. And when we've separated work from education for far too long in our education system. The modern economy demands that our children and not just our children, but those that are struggling with employment right now, understand that work and education actually go together. We need a new and unprecedented investment in our trade and technical institutions. There are incredible jobs available out there right now that don't need a 4-year degree, that sometimes only need a 6-month certificate, and yet we can't find the employees we need to fill those jobs. Now, by the way, this is important in times of plenty, as we're coming off the most prosperous decade in our state's history. The biggest problem that employers were facing were finding employees for the jobs that they had available. But also true in times of crisis where we find ourselves right now. The ability, and we have a group that is working on this right now. We're very excited. Over the next few days, we're going to be talking more about rapid reemployment, but importantly, rapid retraining, giving people an opportunity. Look, the modern workforce has changed so much. Used to be, I talked to a guy not long ago who retired, and he said, when I graduated from college, I had all of the knowledge that I needed for the first 30 years of my career. Those days are gone. That will never happen again. Too often we're graduating people from college who don't have the knowledge they need for the first year of their career. It's not an issue with our colleges. It's the changing nature of work. So we have to be investing in workforce and making sure that they have the tools that they need to adapt to the jobs of the future, which means, again, we have to lower the price of education so that we are a society of constant learners, that every few years we're getting retrained and retooled for the jobs of the future. And that's going to be the key for Utah leading out. We have an incredible education system here. There's more that we can do, and we're going to work with those in the education community to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Mr. Hughes, biggest challenges and opportunities beginning your term in 2021. 3 minutes is yours, please.
So the biggest challenge, to put it bluntly, is that this economy is being destroyed by the day. What I would have said in January when I announced my candidacy compared to what I'm telling you today is that we are seeing those jobs falling apart, not being able to be reopened when this color code ends. Let me just tell you about this. I don't want to see a color yellow. I don't want to see a slow trickle of this economy. It's old glory. It's red, white, and blue. I trust the people of Utah, truly trust them to make let good information drive good decisions. Our interests are aligned here. We make sure that those precautions are in place. We put that, and when I say make sure, I mean make sure that these business owners and employees and patrons, we have the good information we need to get this economy started right now. That's our biggest challenge. When you hear just yesterday that it is going to take 2 to 4 years just to get to where we were at the beginning of March, I don't think we can talk about much else. Then how do we get those businesses back to where they were just a month and a half ago? Here's what you do. We were lucky to have 45 town hall meetings before we saw ourselves go into this lockdown. And by the way, if someone said this state didn't lock down, I've got a lineup of people that would love to talk to you about how their lives have been impacted by the decisions that were being made. So what we do is we look at the regulatory climate. I was hearing this before we saw this shutdown, that the regulatory climate and working with the state and its agencies or departments has been hard. There's been a prohibitive nature to it. We need to put the servant back in public service, and we have to, or servants, and make sure that we have deregulate right now or lower the regulatory barriers so that these businesses can get back working faster. I was part of the legislature in 2008 when we had the Great Recession, and 10% of our budget didn't show up, and it required a lot of staring at budgets and cutting. That's something that's going to come. If you don't have economic activity, you don't have tax collection. That means that in 2021, when the legislature convenes, we're going to see billions of dollars in shortfall likely. What do? You just can't take all that federal money. That federal money comes with strings attached. It tells you how to spend your state dollars. There's never been a federal dollar that gives you greater states' rights or more autonomy as a state. So cutting and making sure that we sharpen our pencil in these times, lowering the regulatory burden so that businesses can get back to work as fast as they can, and not be a barrier to that. And then finally, we've got to make sure that while we're doing that, at the same time, what we talked about in the last question, our infrastructure investment, I know that in the first 2 years, and by the 24th month of my administration, what we'll have is an operable inland U.S. Customs bonded port of a system that will come in 24 months. That is going to be a great economic engine for the state of Utah. And that's how you take the challenges that we're saying today and you turn them around into great advantages for our state. We're ready for this.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Mr. Huntsman, your answer to the question of taking office in 2021, your biggest challenges and opportunities. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. I believe that we have the opportunity to experience the greatest period of growth and advancement our state has ever seen. That's where we are. It's out of adversity that we're able to create new opportunities and unleash the entrepreneurial and creative spirit that exists in the state. While serving as governor before, it became pretty clear to me that a governor does not create jobs. A governor is responsible for making the environment more competitive. That's through clearing out regulations. It's a competitive tax code. It's making sure that the state is properly marketed, any number of other things. So it leads me to conclude this. You know, we hear a lot of words and we hear a lot of statistics, but I have to tell you, our biggest challenge going forward, since we are fundamentally beginning a new period of history post-COVID-19, our biggest challenge is small thinking and people who aren't imagining what the state can be going forward, thinking big enough. That's our challenge, because we don't know what we don't know. And I just want to take you back just a little bit, because when I ran last time, I put forward a 10-point plan. And Greg Hughes and others remember this because they helped work with me on it. We did things like rebrand the state, Life Elevated, still there, same thing. We did things like reform the tax code. First time it had been done in a very, very long time. It was tried most recently and failed. We delivered the first flat tax in the United States of America. We took the tax off of food almost off in its entirety, just as people most recently we were trying to take it back up again. We created the Governor's Office of Economic Development, GOED, which still today is the centerpiece, although bloated, for much of what the economic development activity does and where it's centered. We created the World Trade Center, which allowed those in our rural communities to access and to learn about foreign market opportunities for many of their agricultural exports. We created an economic development strategy around key clusters, just to name a few. So I wanted to just share some of this with you to say that being governor is about leadership. It's about vision, but it's about the ability to actually implement and get things done with the legislature, with key stakeholders, and folks who have a lot of differing agendas. So I look forward to bringing the kind of thinking I did before to the leadership in the governor's office. We're going to create a safe haven for investments, and we're going to establish Utah as the crossroads of the world. Two of the most important things we can do to make sure that we have capital and to make sure that we keep brain power and our entrepreneurs and our kids in this marketplace where they can make choices about opportunities going forward. So thank you for that very important question.
Thank you. And thank you to the candidates for dealing with the 3-minute curveball. That concludes our rounds of questions. Each candidate will now have 2 minutes for closing comments. Candidates, in your final remarks, consider including what distinguishes you from your opponents, and why should a business leader watching this forum support you over the others. Consider your record, your vision, your selection of your lieutenant governor running mate as part of your answer. The order for the final remarks has been selected through a randomizer program. We will hear first from Mr. Huntsman, then Mr. Hughes, followed by Mr. Wright, and conclude with Mr. Cox. Mr. Huntsman, you have 2 minutes, sir.
Thanks, Cameron. It's been a pleasure to be with you and all those involved in organizing this event. We thank you so very much. Yeah, I learned when I ran before that no one's going to vote for you unless you ask for the vote. And so I want to take this opportunity to ask you for your vote. And I hope that by doing so, it means that we're earning it, that our track record, what we bring to the table, which is a combination of leadership at the state level, leadership at the national level, and internationally, because the American economy won't recover if the global economy doesn't recover with us. And the Utah economy is not going to recover if the American economy doesn't recover. And we're going to need leaders with business experience, state leadership experience, and global leadership experience, along with a network of contacts and relationships to make this state soar. And when I say we're going to make this state the crossroads of the world, we're going to attract capital and keep brain power and focus on the industries of tomorrow, which will require the new kinds of infrastructure that we talked about, new types of training and educational opportunities. That's where we're going. And anything short of that would be letting down the good people, the taxpayers, the citizens of this state. I'm prepared to lead out. I'm prepared to bring all that I have experienced in my career, some of it international, some of it helping to run some of the great companies in the United States of America, and yes, some of it having served as governor of the greatest state in America for you once before, where we had a lot of accomplishments. So thank you for this opportunity. I ask you for your vote. The years ahead, yes, they're a little uncertain, but we're going to turn that uncertainty into opportunity. Let's take the ride together. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mr. Huntsman. Mr. Hughes, your 2-minute closing comments, please.
Thank you, Cameron. I appreciate the opportunity, appreciate all the issues that we've been able to discuss. These are critical issues and these are tough times. What I would argue what differentiates myself and my ticket of myself and Commissioner Victor Iverson from Washington County is that we do have a history and a heritage of tough times not lasting, but the tough people lasting. And this pioneer heritage, it allows us to be able to make the hard decisions, to be able to push against and lean against the opposition that comes. Let me just tell you what's going to come in 2021. There's going to be an incredible resistance to the conservative approach to getting our budget right, getting our businesses back to online and getting them thriving and profiting once again. There's going to be a gravitational pull for more and more federal funds. And with all those strings attached, you're going to see so the liberal media attack whoever is the next governor if they're not complying with the agenda. You're going to see special interest groups that are going to attack as well. When I was speaker, we saw this on Obamacare expansion, putting white crosses in the lawns around the Capitol, accusing the House members of murder and killing people. It gets that ugly. You have Twitter storms and you have social media storms that hit. What you need to be able to do, and if you haven't been through those things, I don't know that you can say it. I don't know you can tell honestly what you would do unless you've been through those situations, is that I am battle tested. Commissioner Iverson and Washington County, Southern Utah, they have grown in spite of the odds being against them. We're battle tested. We lean into these issues. So you're getting in this ticket a conservative ticket and a battle tested and proven record of doing the hard things that are going to require the the fortitude to get through the attacks that come. Let me just say this. Finally, let me just finish and say, I'm calling for us to reopen these businesses tomorrow. And I mean tomorrow, not in some color code either. Under the red, white, and blue of this country and the land of the free and home of the brave, let's open right now.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Mr. Wright, your 2-minute closing comments, please.
This race isn't about me. And it isn't about anything other than you and the state of Utah. Businesses have been hit so hard. Our economy has been hit in a way that we could have never anticipated just a couple months ago. Having business experience and understanding, when I built my business in the Great Recession, I sat there, I'll never forget sitting there and looking at the payables and the cash flow and having to make those hard decisions and staying up at night worrying about making payroll and making my lease payments and delivering my service. And it teaches you a lot of things that you can only learn through having lived through it. Politicians and elected officials talk a lot about the private sector, but unless you have lived through that, building a business during a Great Recession, it's really difficult to understand. I understand it. I want to apply that knowledge and that skill set to helping Utah get back on its feet and helping Utahns get back to work. I get asked the question all the time, do you believe in term limits? And I've come to the conclusion that people aren't asking me if I agree with term limits or not. They're asking me, how do we get new people in government? Well, this is your chance. If you're one of the people that's concerned that the same people serve over and over and over, then I am the right candidate for you. Because if we continue to elect the same people over and over and over, people from the private sector aren't going to think that they can run and win. I know I'm lesser known than some of my opponents, but it's time to get to know Thomas Wright. Because if you get to know me, you'll know that I will work hard. I will be honest with you, and I will bring my business experience to the governor's office every day. We will talk about difficult things. We will make tough decisions. We will make Utah the very best it can be because I can apply the private sector knowledge I have. I know enough about state government to know that you're not the CEO when you're the governor. You have to work with people. I've proven I can do that in a variety of areas in my life. And I want to prove that a new person can get in, run, win, and serve, and not just the people with the familiar names. So please vote for me, Thomas Wright, for governor.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Appreciate that. Mr. Cox, please, your final 2-minute closing statement.
Cameron, thank you. And thank you to the Davis County Chamber, the Utah County Chamber for your incredible work here. Serving as a lieutenant governor over the past 6 years has been the honor of a lifetime, but it was one of the hardest decisions we've ever made. When out of nowhere, Governor Herbert asked me to serve in this position, to give up my business, to leave the farm, and make a decision to serve the state. It was incredibly difficult, but it has also been one of the most rewarding experiences that I've ever had because I've been able to work with people across the state in the best times and the worst of times. And I'm so proud of what we've been able to do together as a state over those last 6 years. Now, you ask why people should consider voting for me. This election really is about proven leadership. First, I ran a business for 10 years, a business that doubled in size during the Great Recession, a business that provided jobs to people in rural Utah, people who were struggling. It was an incredible opportunity and one that has influenced everything I've done in government and every decision that I've made. Two, I'm the only candidate for governor in the history of candidates for governor who has served as on a city council, has served as mayor, has served as a county commissioner, has served in the legislature, and has served as lieutenant governor. That experience at the local level and at the state level gives me an insight into how we can do government better serve the people, better serve businesses in the state. Now, I've been fortunate to work with Governor Herbert over the past 6 years as we together collectively built the greatest economy in the history of the state of Utah, lowest unemployment in the history of the state, lowest unemployment in the country, leading the nation in private sector job growth. And we did this, government doesn't create jobs. We did it by getting out of the way. We did it by removing business regulations and letting the entrepreneurs of this state do their thing. We've been here. We've always been here, and we're not going anywhere, and we can't wait to serve as your governor and lieutenant governor.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes today's Republican Party Gubernatorial Candidate Forum. And I thank our candidates and all participants as well as those behind the scenes making today's event a success. A recording of this forum will be available online at thechamber.org. One word, thechamber.org. And it will be shared with business leaders who weren't able to tune in today, as well as shared and posted publicly through various social media outlets. Before we end this virtual event, we will hear a brief word from the Utah Valley Chamber President and CEO, Ronna Ralph. Ronna.
We want to thank the candidates, Spencer Cox, Greg Hughes, John Huntsman Jr., and Thomas Wright for participating in the forum today. We wish you gentlemen the best of luck with your campaigns. And thanks to the members of the Association of Utah County Chambers and the Davis Chamber for sponsoring today's event. And a special thank you to you, Cameron. Thank you for moderating the event. We look forward to a time when we are able to meet again in person. And thanks again for joining the forum. Have a great week and go vote.